Marin. The year is 2020. It's become nearly impossible to commute from Marin to San Francisco. Northern Marin commuters face a stark choice between a 3 to 4 hour round trip in their car or even longer on transit. Quality of life is being affected. Stresses are being placed on families. More divorces are happening. People are losing their jobs. Realtors have been telling people to lower their house prices to sell. It's affecting those with lower incomes the worst, as they can't easily get to jobs, and some need to work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But that's not possible anymore. The promised transit alternative turned out to be no more than a leap of faith, where the theory was never rigorously validated. Somehow, to make transit work, the geniuses in planning justified it by building more and more high-density housing. We found out later that Wall Street and developers had a hand in spreading those myths. All the dreamlike promises of the so-called SMART train never seemed to materialize. Commuting to San Francisco using transit cost over $35 a day, or $8,000 a year. You wonder how it was ever considered common sense that all this building would reduce greenhouse gas emissions when all around you see traffic congestion and needless, avoidable emissions. Some still wonder how it all happened. The changes were subtle but cumulative over the years. You'd lived in your house trusting that the local politicians were doing the right thing, but you didn't realize that they had succumbed to a dogma of transit-oriented development, or in many cases simply development. You'd heard of Plan Bay Area, but didn't know much about it. The Marin supervisors back then all supported it. Someone once told you it was a big deal, that it opened up the Bay Area for extensive high-density development around transit hubs, and together with state Senate bills removed obstacles to overdevelopment. And how the supervisors and the plan paid little heed to the impact that all that new housing would have on schools, police, water, and taxes. Taxes that had crept steadily higher. You wondered just how remarkable it was that the plan was sold by the county supervisors as being sustainable. An early sign of trouble was Grafton Casino in Rohnert Park. It didn't seem like an issue. It opened in November, wintertime. But that first summer day commute home on a Friday evening, the combination of thousands of casino goers, added to commuters and day trippers, really jammed 101. That night, instead of getting home at 6:45 p.m., you arrived home at 8 p.m. You thought it was just a fluke. But then it started to happen every Friday. Soon, it was every night. The first obvious sign of trouble was the Wind Cup building in Corte Madera. Back then, you thought the 5-story, 180 housing unit apartment blocks were huge, but built for all the right reasons, to provide affordable housing and reduce congestion. The new low-income residents were supposed to take nearby transit or work nearby. It was only years later you heard it was almost entirely market-rate housing. The local newspaper conducted a survey to discover that nearly all of the residents took at least 2 trips a day in their cars, and many still commuted long distances. But the one thing you regret looking back is not opposing the Larkspur Station area plan and other ill-conceived high-density developments. You drove past Larkspur almost every day. Sometimes you took the ferry. Back in 2014, it was just an inconvenience, a traffic bottleneck that you figured would get sorted out. But the Larkspur Station area plan changed all that. Defenders of the plan proclaimed it planned nothing. But what it did was to open up the area to 920 high-density housing units. The defenders claimed the new residents would take the nearby ferry or the train. They used this to justify the removal of the 100 ferry terminal parking spots. What a mess that made of ferry parking. Once built, the change was irreversible. The extensive 920 housing units at Larkspur Landing made the 180-unit Wind Cup look like a small apartment block. As the new residents moved in, the 101 northbound crawl became steadily worse. You thought about biking to work. The 40-mile round trip might have seemed practical to those eco-warriors who pushed Larkspur Landing through, but it was simply never going to work for you. Once Corte Madera and Larkspur had high-density housing, the precedent was set and the appetite whetted for developers. It happened everywhere around the Bay Area. Developers and special interests perfected how to get development approved, removing obstacles such as cries from Marinites that their beautiful, treasured county and their small towns were being irreversibly changed. Finally, you reflected. You'd really enjoyed living in Marin, but after about 2015, the place had changed. It was no longer the place you once knew and loved. This fictional story is not too far from what may happen to Marin and Sonoma. Instead of asking, what could I have done? The answer is, we're approaching a tipping point today, and here's what you can do. While our houses are an enormous investment that we treasure, and we might not think twice about spending $120 to go out for dinner and a movie, many of us don't donate to politicians and groups like Citizen Marin to preserve and defend what we stand for. In Marin, this means it is imperative for the people to get the right candidates into local offices when local elections come up. We need fresh leadership, electing new people in office who do not support special interest groups that can stop this unsustainable building. It means we need to be prepared to donate money and time to save our treasured county. If there's one thing you can do today, right now, it's to sign the online petition opposing the Larkspur Station Area Plan. Together, with your help, Marin can still grow, but it can do so while remaining a wonderful place to live and a treasure that everyone can visit.